And we can move on off that and on to, the guy you were alluding to earlier, who is RJ Barrett, who, for whatever reason, and I'm going to present a theory, but the data and the analytics, all of it just despises him. And it's pretty much despised him his whole career. Which is, that sucks. Like, you take a guy number 3 overall, you want him to be good. But also I named my freaking Twitter account after him. He's beloved in New York, everybody, you watch him, and like, for people listening, like, we saw that we all watched the playoffs with our 2 eyes. He played 11 games. He played 4 or 5, ranging from rock solid to very good. And everyone watched those games and they were like, okay, he's taken a step up from what was admittedly a poor regular season. And then you look at the on-off data and, he's once again an outlier. Like, the Knicks were plus 9.3 when he sat per 100 and tied for a team worst -3 per 100 when he was on. So they were over 12 points worse per 100 when RJ played than when he sat. Now, to be completely fair, a lot of that is tied to the minutes he shared with Josh Hart. Him and Josh Hart played like half their minutes together or something, and they lost those minutes by 14 points per 100 possessions. They were just absolutely slaughtered in those minutes. Other teams did not respect RJ and Hart at the 2 and 3, did not care about them if they were 1 or 2 passes away. And that allowed them to help off when Brunson or Randall, mostly Brunson, let's be frank, was trying to do stuff inside the paint. So here's my theory about RJ Barrett and analytics. RJ right now he's shown flashes as a defender, but on the whole, at least for last season, he wasn't a very good defender, being generous. He definitely wasn't a good passer on his drives. He passed on like 29% of his drives or something. He upped that number to 40 or 45% in the playoffs, which was encouraging. So what RJ Barrett is right now is a scorer. And he doesn't score very efficiently, despite the fact that he gets to the rim and gets into the paint as good as almost any player in the league. I'm not going to say any player in the league, but he is elite at getting 2 feet in the paint and getting to good spots. And so when you're optimizing RJ Barrett, like they tried to do in the playoffs, like we all saw, Tibbs basically said, okay, Randall doesn't have it, Quickly doesn't have it. I'm going to reduce their roles. RJ, you're our number 2 guy now. He's going to prioritize scoring. And even when he does it better than we've seen him be capable of, so like we saw him improve from the regular season to the playoffs, that's still worse than the average number 2 option. And I think that's what the impact data is trying to say. We're all relating it to, okay, RJ Barrett's playing the best basketball we've ever seen him play. But the impact data doesn't care that RJ improved on a poor regular season. What they care about is, okay, this is in his role as the number 2 option. This is the output he's putting up. And compared to other number 2 options, it's not good. Like, even in the playoffs, you look at his playoffs, he wasn't super efficient. What was his true shooting in the playoff? Like 54, 55 or something like that?
I think it was 55%, yeah.
Yeah, so that's good, but league average for the season was 58. That probably goes down in the playoffs. Let's say league average is 56. Okay, so he's average efficiency. He's just, even though he improved, he's not creating offense at a level that a high-impact second option is. And I think that's how you have to frame it if you're trying to objectively assess what his overall impact was. Knicks fans, we're all biased. We all loved that playoff run. We're all super into the moment. And RJ Barrett was called the X Factor. And so you're already watching it through a lens of, okay, RJ's coming off kind of a shaky regular season, and oh my God, he's playing better. You're immediately going to be biased. These analytics are not biased. And I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm actually like not even saying that I think, oh, this means RJ was bad. The Knicks were. No. I'm just trying to frame why, for whatever reason, the analytics do not like RJ Barrett. And I'm going to pass it over to you, XJ. First of all, how do you feel about that? Second of all, if that's true, what steps does RJ Barrett need to take as a player so all of a sudden his impact is higher?
I think you crushed it, because I have a very similar perspective on this question. And how I think about it is like, it only matters that he's the second option in terms of its relevancy to looking at how the metrics view him, because he's using so many possessions. So if you're using a possession, and if you're using a lot of possessions, and you have to make sure that the possessions that you're using generates efficient shots. And if you're not generates efficient shots that are made, because otherwise you're the one that's impacting the game. And if your impact, it leads to inefficient shots, you're not doing your job well. So for instance, I think that RJ can generate efficient shots, but I don't think his decision making allows it to kind of play out that way. When he takes shots at the rim, he can get there all day, but he doesn't make them at an efficient clip. And so if you're using a bunch of possessions, those possessions are not efficient. Impact metrics are going to pick that up. They're going to say, wow, every time this guy uses possessions, they don't go well. They're not scoring at an efficient way. I think that the way that RJ can change that is in the same way that a lot of us have talked about, a lot of various people have talked about, you've talked about, Geoff, is passing out a lot more than he does. And he started to do that in the playoffs, and it started to work well. And honestly, his impact in the playoffs was better than we saw in the regular season. The plus minus stuff is full of noise, one would say. And it's really what you talked about, playing a ton with heart in a lineup that didn't work. And in the playoffs for the Knicks, honestly, the only players that were going to have a good plus minus are players that played a ton of minutes with Brunson, because Brunson was literally the only guy that was like elevating that team into plus minus territory.
And the guy who just, they always seem to win his minutes.
And quickly, of course,
the guy who led the team in on-court plus minus by having the worst playoffs ever.
yeah. And quickly, of course, obviously Quickly's impact on what came on the defensive end, which is harder for people to notice, I think, than it is for someone who's just scoring every time very efficiently. But yes, of course, and Quickly. But I guess just like my point is that for RJ to actually be seen as a positive contributor, as a positive value guy by the impact metrics, he's going to have to be generating efficient shots with the possessions that he uses. And the only way for him to do that, if he's not going to suddenly become like a better finisher around the rim, is going to be to pass, to make better decisions, and to pass to really efficient shots. And he has the capability of doing it. We saw it some in the playoffs. He just has to do it a lot more. And the funny thing is, like, the RJ that we saw in the playoffs, like you mentioned, Geoff, like comparative to his regular season, we're like, wow, this guy's amazing. But really, that should be his floor. Like his playoff performance should be like, that's what you get from RJ on a regular night, like kind of like a solid night from RJ, like it's all right. And then he can go up from that based on like making threes more often, based on finishing at the rim, drawing more fouls. Those are ways that he can ascend from that floor. But that should be the baseline. What we saw from him in the playoffs, to me, it should be RJ Barrett's floor on a day in, day out basis. And then we can see elevations on some nights when he really has it going. He's hitting his three. He's able to really attack people's hands and draw fouls. To me, that's kind of the next level. So, yeah, I just think his playoff performance in this regular season, it would be ideal if that was like his floor performance. And then we would see the impact metrics would completely swing around the other way.
Yeah, I always say, before we move on, I always say RJ needs to get to a point where his floor, where scoring and shooting almost has no impact on his floor. Like, he needs to get to a place where his defense, his rebounding, and his passing rates on drives are so good and so helpful that the only thing his scoring and three-point shooting specifically do is determine how high his ceiling can be.